What's up, everybody? It's Friday, March 18th. Friday, yes. Beautiful day here in New York, 70 degrees, springtime. I love it. All right, another big day up in the market. So looks like I called that pretty accurately a few days ago. I said that was the end of the correction. And again, I quantified, or I attempted to quantify, the negative impact from the war and the sanctions. And I think that was the correct assessment. I'm starting to see some commentary here and there, people saying, hey, maybe the market has discounted the worst for, the worst for now. And that's basically what I said and what I calculated in that, when I quantified the impact of the sanctions using the hit that the banks took. And again, banks are price setters. They price assets based on how much they intend to lend against those assets. So they serve a very important function as price setters in the economy, just like the Fed, and Fed is a bank too. So there you go. And by the way, this part of the rally, I think, is really just the initial phases. This is like the short covering phase. This is people who bought puts and they're, or sold calls and they're losing money on that, and they're getting margin calls and they have to get out. So this is more or less the technical phase of the rally. We're not in the FOMO period yet. I spoke about that yesterday. I believe we're going to have a very robust FOMO rally. FOMO meaning FOMO, fear of missing out. There's still a high level of bearish sentiment, a high level of negativity. People are very worried. They're very concerned about the war, about the sanctions. All these things have, and interest rates going up. And I have to laugh a little bit again because I saw some more commentary today about how they're trying, the very smart people, right? How they're trying to rationalize this market rally because, hey, this shouldn't be happening because the Fed is raising interest rates. So they're still sitting there. Like I gave the example of Steve Leisman of CNBC on the day when the Fed raised rates on Wednesday, and he was like, I have no way of explaining this. Like he was baffled by it. And he's right up there speaking to all the the head honchos of Wall Street, and he's getting fit. And they're probably, if he's saying that, then they're obviously saying the same thing to him because he's just parroting what he's hearing out there. If there was somebody at some high level that he speaks to that said, well, Steve, the reason is rate hikes are a fiscal expansion, and this has already been, priced in, and he would be parroting that, but he wasn't. But anyway, I saw more commentary today along those lines of like, all right, how do we explain this? It's like, we've never seen something like this. It's not the way it should happen, but what can I tell you? I try to help you get more informed on this stuff, and hopefully it helps you to make some money. Here's something that I'll bring to your attention is the fact that right now the federal deficit is down $671 billion compared to this time last year. So you heard it here first. It is now down $671 billion compared to last year. The reason for that is last year at this time, Congress passed the American Rescue Act. That was the Biden stimulus. What was it, like 1.6 or 1.7 trillion? I forget. But in this period in March last year, something like over 300 billion was sent out in payments. So that really now just widened that differential between the deficit now. The deficit now is about 844 billion. The deficit at this time last year was like 1.5 trillion. Okay, so it's 671 billion we are down. And Biden has been going around championing, saying, "Hey, we're gonna be the first administration ever to bring the deficit down by $1 trillion," and he's gonna be right. He's gonna be right, but that's really not something to brag about, because we can see very clearly that the lower deficit is resulting in a lower level of economic growth. In fact, a much lower level of economic growth. I think in the first quarter now of this year, the forecast is about for 0.5% GDP growth. I think we're going to do a little bit better than that, because it looks like the fiscal flows are picking up. And this first quarter will probably be, I think it's going to be the low point of growth for the year. I think it's going to pick up in the second quarter and as we go out. But it's very easy to see the correlation between the deficit and growth. Deficit is down $671 billion and growth is almost flat. So if I was a president, I wouldn't be running around, bragging about that. I'd be trying to explain to people that this is not a good thing, because the deficit equates to a net transfer in income from the government to the non-government, to us, to the economy. And by the way, you can also see that personal saving has dropped significantly because of the reduction in the deficit. So it's really not a good thing. Now you might say, well, Mike, if it's down so much, and if spending is down so much compared to this time last year, why aren't we in a recession? Well, we're close, like I said, we're close to flat growth. We just have slight growth. But what I'm saying is the current level of spending, which is going to come out around $600 billion a month, I think that is sufficient. Don't forget, I've said this in the past, $600 billion a month, that's like a 50% increase from the pre-pandemic monthly spending numbers. Like all during the Trump presidency, we were doing about $420 billion, and that was enough to keep growth around 3%, 2.5%, 3%. So I mean, at $600 billion, even if we're a little bit less, $550 billion, that's still a sufficient flow, in my opinion anyway. That's a sufficient flow to keep the economy on a growth trajectory. We're not going to be doing 10% growth. We're not going to be doing even 6% growth. But we may settle back down into that 1.5% to 2.5% growth range. Maybe not even 2.5. Maybe 1% to 1.5. But on that note, the slower growth will help to bring inflation down. I mean, I think there's no question about it that the slower growth will help to bring inflation down. Longer term, got to be thinking about commodities. And if you actually, Putin did a big speech the other day. It's on the internet. I actually tweeted it. I would recommend, even if you hate his guts, I would recommend listening to that speech in its entirety. And he said something very interesting, which I think is true, long-term perspective. He said, now that it has been clearly exposed that the West, and specifically the United States, as a dollar hegemon, can basically steal your financial assets, can freeze them, can take them away through sanctions. That the world now understands this, and I've said this for many, many years, that the sanction risk, the weaponization of the dollar. But Putin said something very interesting. So now the shift will be away from currency as things that central banks and countries hold in reserve, to real assets. In other words, food, land, raw materials, he said. And this will just reduce the global supply as countries hold on to tangible real assets as reserves, as opposed to, central bank digital, basically accounting entries that could be canceled at any time. I thought it was a very interesting point. So that's very long term. I mean, that is not going to affect, I don't think it's going to have an effect over a large effect over the course of this year. If we see growth coming down, I think we're also going to see inflation coming down. But when you take a long-term perspective, and I think he's right about this, that now it's been very clearly exposed the risk involved in holding anyone else's currency, or any currency for that matter, as opposed to holding real assets. I mean, it's just, the world geopolitically has gotten to a point where there's not a lot of safety in those assets, and I did a video on what that guy was named Zoltan Pozar. He talked about inside money, okay, which is central bank reserves, currency, and outside money, things like gold and what Putin said were hard assets, real assets. So very interesting. And anyway, again, I think the market is in a bull trend. We are still in the early stages. We're going to see all of this negativity reversed. You're going to see a FOMO rally, and I'll be talking about this at some point down the road, and I'll be mentioning to you how bullish sentiment is really, really high, how the put-call ratio is really, really low. You'll see. I mean, I think this is pretty obvious how this is going to play out at this point. Anyway, that's it for today, folks. It's Friday. Go out, enjoy. I'm going to go out and enjoy this beautiful weather, and see you tomorrow. Bye.